Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Let's Talk Fantasy Football. I'm your host tonight. My name is Nick Walsh, and I am here with the one, the only, the DON. I am here with Don Chrisman. Don, how's it going, dude?
Yo, man, nothing wets my whistle more for the first podcast for me this season than the AFC East, dude. Can't wait.
Yeah, dude, you love talking about the Jets more than anything else in your entire life. That's one thing I know about you.
Massive turn on.
Yeah, for sure. Just real horny over there to talk about Sam Darnold. Anyway, guys, it's me and Don. We're here. We're pumped. We're doing the AFC East. This will be part one of the AFC East podcast. Today we are going to cover the New York Jets and the New England Patriots. So the two teams, I guess, I was going to say with the most stability, but that's not true at all. The Jets have like a brand new front office and head coaching situation. So that would just be a really dumb thing to say. Anyway, we're going to cover the Jets and the Patriots. It's going to be sweet. Next week we'll be doing the AFC North, but for this week, keep an eye out for part two coming at you later. And if you haven't listened, Shrek and Vanny covered the NFC East in detail last week, so definitely check that out if you need your news and notes on all those NFC East teams. Don, you got anything else, or should we just jump right into it?
Yeah, man, I think that real quick, if you did listen to Vinny and Shrek, they kind of like talked about our duo and our dynamic, and I feel like Shrek like laid out this like love-hate relationship. It's all love here with me and Walsh. I mean, on a social aspect, Walsh can't tolerate me until he's drunk, and then he has a real deep appreciation for me.
That's true.
But on a podcast level, man, we have a great time. So look forward to a lot of love and AFC East good stuff over here.
Yeah, absolutely. It is all love on the podcast. There was at Shrek's bachelor party earlier this year, there was a specific quote where at a certain point in the day, I started laughing at something you said and said, Don, I'm drunk enough to find you funny again. So in real life, our dynamic is slightly different, but it works out all right. And hopefully that shines through in the podcast. All right, let's jump into it with the Jets here. I mentioned it before, but we got some big picture changes here. Todd Bowles out as the head coach. Adam Gase comes in as the new head coach. Bit of a weird hire in a lot of people's eyes. He's going to install his own offensive system. And then he also managed to run the GM out of town before the season started, but after all of the offseason acquisitions and departures were made, which is a bizarre time for the GM to leave. So a bit of turmoil here. What's your opinion on Adam Gase as a coach and just sort of the status of the New York Jets as a whole here?
Yeah. So I don't know what my take is for him with the New York Jets yet, but obviously you heard me and maybe all of us bitch about it, but me, I know Vinny, we bitch about Adam Gase a lot on the podcast last year with everything that he did with Miami and all the potential that we were really looking forward to a Miami team last year. And there was just no stability for a fantasy standpoint. He obviously had a very strong ego where it came to hinder you for like a Devontae Parker or anybody else on that team. So you really didn't know where to go. It was very frustrating. Or if you owned Kenyon Drake, stuff like that. So I think in a sense there's going to be different players than there were on a Miami team there's more talent like a Le'Veon Bell. Sam Darnold's the clear-cut quarterback. They got some, Jamison Crowder is their definite, like their slot position wide receiver. So there's going to be a little bit more definites, but there's still also a lot of questions with Adam Gase and the whole new organization as itself as the Jets.
Yeah, absolutely. Shrek and I touched on it on the initial, the comeback podcast for the year, but I want to love the Jets this year because Sam Darnold finished the season red hot. Robbie Anderson was a monster. They brought in Le'Veon Bell. Chris Herndon's going into his second year and was productive as a first-year tight end, which rarely ever happens. But just like you said, Adam Gase was the devil for fantasy last year. Like, people produced on Miami, but you couldn't predict it. You never knew who it was going to be. It would come off of like 2 touches, and like Albert Wilson would get 2 touchdowns off of like,
right,
two catches for like 100 yards, it was just bizarre. And I'm afraid of that with the Jets, which is a shame because there's so many guys to really want to sink your teeth into here.
Yeah, you can't even forget Quincy Enunwa either, which we'll hit too. But there's just a lot of there's a lot of depth. There really is.
There's a lot of guys who have been fantasy relevant guys in past years and have a chance to as well this year. We'll start with Darnold. Darnold is currently going the fourth pick in the 14th round. Oh, before we get into these, all of these ADPs are from Fantasy Football Calculator. They are 12-team PPR ADPs. So Sam Darnold, fourth pick in the 14th round, currently quarterback 24. What do you think about that price and just Sam Darnold in general? Are you buying that he's going to take another step and maybe continue where he left off at the end of last year?
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to beat a dead horse with it too. Obviously, if you've listened to us, we're all very off quarterbacks in general. Walsh, you've actually proven, especially in our league, which is a pretty intense league, and none of us are high on quarterbacks, but you especially, you've shown back-to-back championships with pretty much streaming quarterbacks, which not many people are comfortable with doing, but you've shown that you can be very successful with just literally streaming weekly quarterbacks, not like a few weeks here or there on matchups and playing one or two quarterbacks, but actually streaming. So, and this year you probably got to be excited because this is probably the most depth for quarterbacks in a while. So Sam Darnold at that point is fine. I think Sam Darnold as a football player is good and he's going to be better this year. But as for drafting, I mean, obviously we're someone that we don't even want you reaching for the top 10 quarterbacks. So to reach for Sam Darnold, I don't think he's someone that needs to be drafted, but can be a plug and play if you're going to stream like Walsh normally does.
Yeah, he's a guy who like you could draft at the end. Like he's a guy who will be on the wire at certain points during the year, more likely than not. So I think he's a great streaming option. I do think there's a chance he really takes that step forward because the last 7 or so weeks of the season were just unbelievable for him. He was great. That game that you guys were at, that Packers-Jets game was he put on a fucking awesome show.
It was a Rodgers-Darnold showdown.
Yeah, crazy. With no stakes, no stakes whatsoever. Both teams just out of it.
Just slinging pig all day on both sides.
Absolutely. So yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward with Darnold. If you really do have some sort of inkling or some sort of, if you're very high on him, like I don't like pretty much past the 10th round or like once you're into like the teens in terms of quarterbacks, like take the guys you like, like if you really like Sam Darnold, like take him there. It's fine. There's no real risk against it.
Listen, obviously there's upside, right? We're talking about, we don't know what the organization is going to do in Adam Gase, but the upside is there. Sam Darnold has shown that he is going to be a good talent. We believe he's going to improve, but he also has a lot of weapons around him. He has 3 to 4 good receivers because you're including his tight end Herndon. And then also he has Le'Veon Bell, who's a pass catching back and is Le'Veon Bell. So there's a lot going his way.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of Le'Veon Bell, let's move right on to that running back position with Bell. He is currently going the 10th pick in the first round. That is running back 7. So for a little bit of perspective, going behind obviously the big 4 and then David Johnson and Melvin Gordon, going just ahead of guys like Joe Mixon, James Conner, Dalvin Cook, Todd Gurley, Damian Williams, etc. So do you like this value for Le'Veon Bell, and what do you really see him doing in a Jets uniform?
So actually, Walsh, was one of the things I wanted to ask you on this podcast because you did touch this with Walsh on the Comeback Cast, and this was something you talked about. And I want you to kind of explain to the listeners more about your thoughts with Le'Veon Bell because you said it's almost a little too rich for your blood. Like you would take a James Conner before Le'Veon Bell, so you would obviously take all those guys ahead of him, which is obviously Barkley, Elliott, Kamara, McCaffrey, Johnson, Melvin Gordon, even a Joe Mixon before Lev Bell.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you're nitpicking at this point in June, but for me, Le'Veon Bell is behind Joe Mixon and James Conner. I don't think I would go as far as putting him behind Dalvin Cook or Todd Gurley or any of those guys. But the reasoning for that is I just think there's a lot more risk in a situation where your first round pick, you really don't want to expose yourself to too much risk. Joe Mixon is in an established situation with a team that whether you're high on the Bengals or not, that Joe Mixon is sort of an ascending running back who is coming off of a very good year and is now in the same situation. James Conner is in Pittsburgh in a situation where we know the Pittsburgh running back has been one of the most fantasy friendly positions in football for years. So, we saw what he did last year. He had just as good of a fantasy season as Le'Veon Bell generally has had in the past. And he's in the same exact situation. So to me, Le'Veon Bell he presents risk because, one, he was out of football for the entire year. Two, he's with a new team. He's the head coach supposedly didn't want to pay him as much money as they actually gave him. So there's a little bit of drama there. And to me, it just doesn't make sense to expose myself to that kind of risk when I have guys who I think are more of a sure thing in Mixon and Connor available on the board.
Okay, I'm going to play a little bit devil's advocate, and I think that's very fair, especially because he's in the Jets. But here's one thing I'll say too, or two things really. One is Le'Veon Bell is a universal player. It's not like he is some scrub. Like this guy, no matter where he is, you could pretty much plug and play him anywhere. I think he's also going to bail out the Jets a lot too when they need to. They're just going to run him, throw him in all different formations. He's going to be catching a lot of passes from Sam Darnold. On top of that, though, you got to remember too, David Johnson, right? He was out for a year too, but not because he decided to rest himself, but because he was actually injured. And then he came back and had a mediocre year last year, but he's going number 5, and Arizona's not that great either. So Le'Veon Bell, man, and we've obviously seen it year after year that he's played, that he's really a top, 1 to 3 back in general. So even if it's the Jets, he took a year off to rest and make more money, which he didn't. But it's not like he's coming off injury. So with Lev Bell, man, I like Lev Bell better than David Johnson. I like Lev Bell better than Joe Mixon, who has an injury history, and he is on the Bengals. So, I mean, you could split hairs with him and James Conner. I think if you took James Conner over Lev Bell, there's no problem. James Conner is great. Like you said, Pittsburgh's a very friendly running back team, and James Conner has proved himself already. But Le'Veon Bell at that point, I think if you can be the 8th pick and grab a Lev Bell and then swing around and get another RB, I think you're going to get actually really good value, and it's going to pan out for you.
You make a ton of great points. And I will say this, I think there is a much higher chance of Le'Veon Bell finishing as like the RB1 than Joe Mixon or James Conner, for example. I think Le'Veon Bell has all the upside in the world. You're completely correct. He's insanely talented. He didn't have an injury. He has a ton of upside. The Jets coaching staff worries me. It worries
absolutely.
me a ton. So that's my thinking there, but I completely understand yours as well. In terms of his backups, none of them are getting drafted. Currently on the roster, you have Elijah McGuire, Bilal Powell, Ty Montgomery, Trenton Cannon. You wouldn't think all of those guys are going to break camp with the team. Do you have any sort of preference of these guys, or is it just kind of, like hand wave and figure it out when you get there?
It's really funny because like I like going to Roto World and like looking up depth chart and all that, and then clicking on starters, and it's like they have RB1, RB2, like or RB1 goal line back, like the third RB, and it's Lev Bell. Normally, like you at least see like one running back in one of those slots. That is not the starting running back. And it's like it's just Lev Bell. I mean, at this point, there's no preference. I wouldn't draft any of them. Elijah McGuire has been in the system, but again, they have a new head coach and everything else. So it's not like it's a system he's used to. They might want to play Ty Montgomery. Who knows? So the only surefire is Lev Bell. We're not looking to cuff Lev Bell at this point, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, there's no definite handcuff, and when there's no definite handcuff, don't bother.
Yeah.
So I think that pretty much covers the running backs. Let's move on to Sam Darnold's pass catchers. We mentioned them before. So in terms of wide receivers, we've got Robbie Anderson, 11th pick in the 6th round. That's currently wide receiver 30. And then both going undrafted, which is a little surprising to me, is our Quincy Enunwa and Jamison Crowder. So starting with Anderson, do you think he's worth it at that? And I guess, do you like that end of the season for him was insane. And that corresponded with when Darnold was going off, was Robbie Anderson was going off. And it was really the point in the season when Darnold turned a corner was when they decided, fuck it, we're just going to chuck it to Robbie Anderson a bunch. Yeah. So do you think Adam Gase sees that and continues that, or are they going to try and fuck around here?
That's the scary part. Like, I feel like Le'Veon Bell is the more definite than anything else. The wide receivers are what scare me with Adam Gase too, because obviously you've seen kind of what he did with Devontae Parker and Kenny Stills, and you just didn't know. You would think that Devontae Parker would have been the clear-cut one when he was back from his injury, and it just like ego. Who knows if Adam Gase is going to bring the same ego as he did to New York? So Robbie Anderson, obviously, they built that rapport at the end because I was someone that was I scooped Robbie Anderson in a bunch of leagues last year, and Sam Darnold and him didn't really have that rapport to the second half of the year. And again, Robbie Anderson's not a high target share guy for the most part. He's just one of those like Will Fullers, or where he's catching deep bombs and all that. So I don't know, man. I think the safest wide receiver, to be honest, would be Quincy Enunwa coming out. I think that's going to be the person that's probably going to get the highest target share out of the three receivers. But you got to remember, Jamison Crowder's a pretty developed slot receiver too, and I'm interested to see where Jamison Crowder goes. So I don't know, man. I mean, Robbie Anderson, where he's going in the draft. I mean, it's a Will Fuller, Allen Robinson, Alshon Jeffrey, Christian Kirk area. If you want to, sure. I'd probably go Alshon Jeffrey or Allen Robinson before Robbie Anderson, though, this year until I know more.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there that I don't think he's my favorite out of sort of this cohort of wide receivers that's all going around the same area. So if that continues, I likely won't end up with a ton of them. The Enunwa thing, I think, is interesting because he was very productive for a brief time early in the season. But he was getting a ton of targets, and he was also playing in the slot. He was kind of filling that big slot, like the classic Marcus Colston role. And then they brought in Crowder, who you would think would now be filling that slot role. So that kicks Nuno outside. I don't really have enough of a formed opinion on whether or not Quincy Enunwa can sustain a high target share or be productive on the outside, or whether that volume was a product of him being in the slot. So I think he's a bit risky until we get a little bit more clarity on where everyone's lining up and that sort of thing, down to down. Crowder for me is a guy who I've for the past several years, I've thought he would take the next step every single year, and he just hasn't done it. Maybe it's this year. I think I'm done betting on that for the time being.
Last year was definitely a regression, especially for Jamison Crowder, because that was especially when they didn't really have much talent around them at Redskins last year. You would thought that's where he was going to take a big step. So yeah, like I said, that maybe this year, I'm not taking a bet. I'm not going to draft him. I think if there's a last round flyer that I would take, it's going to be probably Quincy Enunwa for the fact that he does have rapport with Darnold and is probably the safer pick. But again, this is where Adam Gase scares me. Is I don't know what his game plan is going to be with the Jets, and who knows what receiver is going to get this share.
Yeah, it's I don't know necessarily that preseason is going to, outside of like who lines up where, I don't know if it's really going to answer our questions too much either. So it becomes a bit of a risky call there. In terms of tight ends, we've got Chris Herndon going 5th pick in the 14th round, tight end 22. I was a little surprised he's as low as he is because I know, we've gone through all of the concerns with the Jets and that kind of thing, but tight ends as rookies are not productive. And Chris Herndon was productive as a rookie tight end. This is a guy who had 8 games with 4 or more targets, which, low threshold, but again, it's tight end. Overall, 56 targets, 39 catches, 502 yards, 4 touchdowns. And a lot of that came towards the second half of the season. So, I mean, it's just, I'm a little bit scared of him, but at the same time, just tight ends don't produce as rookies, and Chris Herndon did. So I kind of buy it going into year 2. What do you think there?
No, I agree. I actually plugged him in a few times at the end of the year in a few leagues. I think it's important too that with the point that you said is, again, that was the second half of the season too, where he was getting an uptick in production. Remember, Sam Darnold was a rookie last year. Herndon was a rookie last year. So they started building rapport and producing more together in the second half of the year. So now that this is going to be a second year for both of them, and they get more acclimated, I think he's probably the safest receiver on the team, to be honest.
I don't think you're wrong there. It's, with Robbie Anderson's fluctuations and just the nature of his game and the uncertainties that we said about the other two, I think you're probably right that he's going to be maybe the most solid week-to-week productive guy for them.
Yeah, I'm cool with that. I mean, listen, if you're in a deeper league or top 8 tight ends are off and you haven't gone, we like to play the wheel, but if you want to go with Herndon, go with Herndon. I think he has the potential to be in, a 8 to 12 spot of tight end.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if you look at other guys like going around that area, like you have Dallas Goedert, who's a backup tight end, and I know he's extremely talented, but you have Dallas Goedert going ahead of Chris Herndon. He is literally a backup. You have Noah Fant going ahead of Chris Herndon. He is a rookie who can't block. Like, you know, you have Jordan Reed, who's made of glass, going ahead of Chris Herndon.
Mm-hmm.
To me, he's a better option than all of those guys.
Agreed.
All right. I think that's going to wrap it up for the Jets. So let's move right on to the Patriots, who had a lot less turmoil in terms of, you know, organizational change throughout the offseason. But the big news, obviously, is that Rob Gronkowski retired. So Gronkowski leaves. We know in terms of fantasy production, he was sort of a shell of himself last year. Still an amazing blocker, still a huge on-field presence, still drew coverage. You know, just sort of used in a different way last year than he had been on the past. But so with Gronkowski retiring, we've got Tom Brady, the third pick in the 11th round. That's quarterback 16. This is the lowest that I can remember Tom
behind
Brady
Josh
ever.
Allen.
That's pretty wild. that is
crazy.
Pretty wild. So with that being said, what do you think about Brady's prospects this year?
Man, I mean, listen, Brady, I think it's crazy that he's going behind Josh Allen. I don't know, man. It's the same thing. I probably won't draft Brady in any league. I think that also Tom Brady has always had higher value too. One other than him being Tom Brady and being Patriots is because of the potential of Gronkowski and how dominant, especially Gronkowski was in fantasy for quite some time. And you know they're looking at what their receivers are now, but man, it's still Tom Brady. You got to remember he's going to be dumping off a lot of passes still to James White. They're going to be using all their running backs that are going to be catching passes and scoring touchdowns, which is big value for Tom Brady. He still has Edelman, who shouldn't be suspended this year, and they always trying to figure a way out. So if you like Tom Brady, you can get, I guess, good value for him this year.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where, you know, we know he's old, but he's still Tom Brady. I am concerned that he will have a significant decline in volume this year. I think a lot of the offseason moves that they made are indicative of them trying to run the ball down people's throats this year. So we'll get into that a little bit as we talk about the running backs, but I'm not targeting Tom Brady. I'm fine if he ends up on one of my teams, you know, somewhere in the 11th round or 12th round or whatever it is. I don't think he's a bad pick. I just don't really have a strong opinion on him this year.
Yeah, it is what it is. You know, I wouldn't feel terrible if Tom Brady's on my team, but I'm not going to go out and grab him either.
Okay,
so falls in my lap, he's going to fall in my lap, and I have Tom Brady.
Absolutely. So let's get on to those running backs that I just referenced. So we've got Sony Michel going first pick in the 5th round. That's RB25. We've got James White going 8th pick in the 5th round. That's RB27. And then also on the roster, we have Damian Harris, who is a 3rd round rookie, and Rex Burkhead. Brandon Bolden, I believe, is also there. People are actually saying they're going to carry 5 running backs like into the season. Like Patriots beat writers are saying that. So that's pretty crazy. But I think, as I said, and I think the Damian Harris draft pick is a sign of this as well. Mm-hmm. I really think they're going to try and just pound the fucking ball up the middle this year. Like Sony Michel, if he's healthy, is going to be a hammer for them. And I think they drafted Damian Harris as sort of a hedge on Michel's health and also to spell Michel to keep him healthy throughout the year.
Sure.
What's your opinion on Michel at his price and just the overall strategy for the Patriots this year?
I think you did a good job explaining it. I think where Michel is falling is a good area of where he's falling. I mean, he's going right before like a Chris Carson, Kenyon Drake. I mean, these guys are, you know, if you're worried about a Patriot running back with consistency, these are guys that are inconsistent. You know, there's weeks where they have really good weeks and there's weeks that they don't. But what you're saying is true, where they are making some moves to look like they really are going to rely a little bit heavier on the running backs. You know, they were high on Sony Michel and we're a little disappointed in his offseason going into his rookie year. But he came back from his injury and he really did show a lot of fantasy production and that he really can handle the pros. the pro level running back. So I think the value is right for Sonny Michel.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, to me, he has a very wide range of outcomes. I think if the Patriots do what they want to do, or at least what I think they want to do, there's a solid chance he ends up a top 5, top 10 back, just because like he rushes for like 110 yards and like 2 touchdowns almost every week. I think there's also a chance. I mean, he just got a knee scope. He has a history of knee injuries. Like I think there's a chance that he ends up being a complete bust for you as well, but not in the on-field sense, but more just in the getting hurt sense. So
Right.
there's a wide range of outcomes there, but he's a potential league winner in my eyes. James White, is going right after him. The guy had 123 targets last year. He
Great
had
year last year.
4 or more targets in 15 games, 5 or more targets in 13 games, and got double-digit targets in 4 games. Do you see that sort of usage continuing?
It's tough, dude. He had a great year last year. I'll tell you what, and I normally wouldn't say it, but if there was like where in those rounds and I needed 2 like running backs back to back, and Sonny Michel was there. I mean, Sonny Michel, well, I don't know, but I wouldn't even mind having a Sonny Michel and James White on my team. They're just 2 different players, but James White has been the most consistent probably the last 3 years. And obviously Deion Lewis not being there really has helped James White. And you never know with Rex Burkhead with his injury statuses all the time as well. So I think James White is fine where he's going to, and I wouldn't even mind having both of them on my team if that was the case.
Yeah, I think you're pretty dead on. Like you're obviously limiting your ceiling if you do that, but like not in a substantial way. I don't think if you're in a PPR league and you're just like, I'm going to soak up the entirety of the Patriots running back production, tight. Like just hope for no Harris or Burkhead touchdowns. Like that's it basically.
Pretty much.
So I mean, White is a guy that I've had in years past, and he is very very fun to own a lot of the time. So
Yeah.
I'm totally on board with you there. We touched on Damian Harris, 3rd round rookie out of Alabama. He's sort of known as the way everyone describes him is basically like what John Gruden gets hard about, in a running back, just like tough nose, like won't go down on the first hit, like willing to like, sacrifice his body, like that kind of shit. So he seems like a banger that I think they got brought in there as sort of insurance for Sonny Michel. Do you have any strong opinions on him or Burkhead?
No, I mean, Burkhead had some fantasy value last year going into the season. I'm going to leave Burkhead, and I'm going to leave him off the table. I'm just literally going to just go Sonny Michel and James White, and then wait to see more during the preseason and going into this year before I do anything else.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me. To me, Harris is sort of the handcuff for Michel, but I don't think he's a guy that you really need to draft unless Sonny Michel's injury concerns is sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Get more concerning. That's not the word I was looking for, but that's the general idea behind it.
That's how I was talking in my remedial English course freshman.
The concerns are going to get bigger. No. But yeah, I think it's pretty safe to not draft these guys unless we get like a really, really different news from the preseason and camps than what we currently have.
Sure.
So let's move on to the pass catchers. We've got Julian Edelman. He is going as the second pick in the 4th round. That's wide receiver 15. And then the other guy getting drafted here is N'Keal Harry, who was the 32nd pick in the draft. So the last first rounder. 3rd pick in the 8th round, currently wide receiver 35. He is out of Arizona State University. Also on the team, we've got Josh Gordon and his indefinite suspension that we have no further updates on at this time. Philip Dorsett's there, Dontrell Inman is there, and Demarius Thomas is also there. Starting with Edelman, do you like him at 402 there?
Edelman is going like right after Diggs and before like a Woods, Galladay, and Cup. Yeah, I'm totally fine with that at that point. Because you're looking at some Rams that are now going to be. You're looking actually at all 3 Rams receivers like directly after him.
It is funny how close those guys are all going together.
So, and then Tyler Lockett, man, just brings value to the team. But again, I would And then Kenny Golladay, that's where it gets a little bit more inconsistent. Julian Edelman is going to be the guy. He's Brady's guy, especially in a PPR standpoint. I'm totally fine with that with Julian Edelman. If you need your second receiver at that point, I think that's solid.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, these guys have all the chemistry in the world. Double-digit targets in 6 of the 12 games last year for Edelman. 5 or more targets in every single game. So he brings a lot of stability. I think he's going to soak up a ton of targets this year because outside of James White, they don't really have any real proven pass catchers on this team. I mean, right. I guess you could say Philip Dorsett, kind of with Tom Brady, but not really. Yeah. So, I mean, I think just out of necessity, he's going to get fed the ball in the pass game. I don't really see him underperforming that ADP unless something drastic happens. Do you have any opinions on N'Keal Harry?
What I can tell you is that he's literally where they have him, and his value is right with the rest of the rookies like DK Metcalf, McCole Hardman. So, I mean, listen, I would say the one encouraging thing is that the Patriots obviously went after a receiver this year in the draft, first round. So they obviously like him and want to utilize him with Tom Brady. If you want to, fly on a rookie receiver at that point, sure. I don't know what the outcome will be just yet. You never know. I'm probably going to stay away, but if you're going to go with those 3 rookies, why not?
Okay. Yeah, that's fair.
I'll probably go like a Geronimo Allison or Marvin Jones, like right before them, though, before I touch those guys.
Yeah, 100%. Not that I'm like an expert on rookies or scouting or anything like that, but I don't love N'Keal Harry. I thought this was kind of an overdraft for them. He's a guy who I believe he's 6'2", 228, so sort of prototypical size and speed, but just has never really been able to get separation. And from their mini camps, it seemed like that trend sort of continued. So is Tom Brady willing to throw to this rookie wide receiver who is likely not going to be open and say, go up and get it? Maybe. I'm not sure. But I'm not sure that I want to spend that high of a pick to find out. I mean, obviously we'll know a lot more in the preseason and all of that, but as of right now, I'm kind of staying away on N'Keal Harry until we get more information.
Sure.
I would assume the other outside spot is going to go to Philip Dorsett. Does that make sense to you, or do you think Demaryius Thomas or Dontrelle Inman have sort of a shot there?
I would say it's Dorsett.
Okay. Yeah, that was kind of my assumption. He's going undrafted. I mean, he's a guy who he's had productive games, but never really put it all together. Like, do you have any interest?
Man, I mean, listen, again, I don't know. It would be like a last round pick, really, and you could take it and it'd probably be cut. And I think he's going to be streamed in the middle of the year during buys and stuff like that, because he has had streaks with Tom Brady where he's proven to be productive. I mean, they went out and got him from the Colts. He's had flashes, but again, he's not going to be a consistent wide receiver 2 or flex for you every week, but there's some value.
Yeah, I agree with that. Unless he really shows progression, I guess, in the preseason, I won't be targeting him, but I wouldn't kill you for taking him as a last round flyer or that kind of thing.
Especially in a team league. If you're in a 14-team league or something, sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So at tight end, we've got Ben Watson, who is old as fuck and suspended. For 4 games. We've got ASJ they signed, and he got released for personal reasons. So now we are down to Matt Lacoste to start the year, who is a guy who I'm pretty sure I played in some leagues last year.
And I got a fat fucking bagel for him, dude. I deserved all of it. It was like just 1 week where I was streaming tight ends every week, and I was like, this is literally the matchup for tight end. I'm playing Matt Lacoste, and I got the 0.0 that I deserved for it.
Hey man, we've all eaten those before. That's the game we play sometimes. That's the classic, just like, everything lines up for CJ Uzomah this week. It's like, no, it doesn't. No, everything never lines up for CJ Uzomah. But Matt Lacoste, I mean, I don't really know what to think about him. I don't think I'm going to target him in drafts unless we really see some chemistry between him and Brady in the preseason. And I mean, how much of Brady are we really going to see in the preseason? So it makes it difficult to evaluate for sure. I will be watching closely because, tight end's a tough position. And if you can get an edge there, it certainly helps. But then even if he does hit, like, you get Ben Watson back in 4 games.
I was reading though, like with Matt LaCosse, like he's never so he's been in the league like 4 seasons, I believe, and he had never appeared in more than 3 games for any team in a season. So, last year he played a little bit more, but I mean, he only caught 24 passes. It was nothing like I don't know. I think the fun fact of this all is the other tight end that could be fighting for the spot is Ryan Izzo, who's from our hometown and played for Pope John. So that'd be cool. Like if he just, won over the spot of Matt LaCosse until old ass Ben Watson comes in.
That's the guy who went to FSU, right?
Yeah, he went to Pope John, which was our parochial county high school.
We didn't go there, public school.
We all loved to hate Pope John. And then he went to FSU. So he was out on IR last year, so he's going to be fighting for a spot. But obviously with tight ends being down, it's possibly a good opportunity for him. That'd be sweet to play him in the fantasy lineup one week.
Yeah, absolutely. Draft the guy who went to our rival school but is from our town.
From our town.
Or don't. It's probably smarter to not do that, but we'll see how it plays out.
Yep.
All right, Don, I think that's going to do it for the Pats. Before we let you guys go, we do have Ed's question of the week, and that's, are you comfortable leaving the draft with Sam Darnold as your only quarterback?
Stream. That's if you're leaving with Sam Darnold at the draft, then you're just planning on streaming like weekly.
Yeah, totally. Like I think they're playing Buffalo week 1, so like I don't think that's a terrible matchup. I mean, I'm comfortable leaving drafts like with like no quarterbacks, so I'm not the correct person to ask in this situation.
I would say there's if for the leagues that or people that do value quarterbacks higher than we do, because we are on literally one spectrum of this, is that I think there's enough depth that you don't have to leave your draft with Sam Darnold as your only quarterback.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Pull on a Phillip Rivers if you're gonna put Sam Darnold on your team.
Yeah, if you're gonna wait till like super late in a draft to get quarterbacks, like Darnold, Lamar Jackson, cool quarterback pairing.
Sure.
Do something like that. It's fine. I wouldn't necessarily leave with him as my only guy. Unless you really think he's going to fuck up Buffalo week 1. But even then, like, I'm not trying to stream the guy with the new head coach that we have all these concerns about week 1.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing is literally just don't know with Adam Gase, man.
Yeah. So I guess the answer is no, for the most part.
But I'm looking forward to the hoedown throwdown between Darnold and Josh Allen week 1.
Oh yeah, that'll be fun. Just both of them fucking slinging the pig all over the place. Yeah, that should be a good time. Well, Don, I think that's going to wrap it up. This was a lot of fun, and we will be back with part 2. So keep an eye out for that. But you got anything to leave the people with here?
No, guys, I'm glad to be back here, and I'm glad we could start off with the Jets as my first time back. So.
Absolutely. All right. Well, for Don, I am Walsh. Later, podcast. All right, should we roll right into part 2, or
let's roll, bro. I'm ready.
All right, let's do it. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Let's Talk Fantasy Football. I'm your host tonight. My name is Nick Walsh, and I am here with the DON. That's Don Chrisman. Don, how are we?
Walshy, what's up, my man?
Nothing, man. I'm hanging out. It's a beautiful day. The Mets are up 9-0. That's great. That's gonna date this podcast, but that's all right. All right, so Don, what we're doing this week, we are doing the AFC East, and we are doing part 2 of the AFC East. If you haven't heard part 1 or the NFC East previews from last week, Shrek and Vinny did those. They're great. Go listen to them. Go listen to part 1 with me and Don. It was a ton of fun. We loved it. And then next week, we're not sure exactly who will be doing them, but we will have the AFC North. So keep an eye out for that. That will be a very fun division. Part 2 of the AFC East is the Dolphins and the Bills. So some interesting situations, not necessarily 2 teams that historically have, or at least over the past few years, have given us a ton of fantasy success,
This
but
is a sexy one.
yeah, definitely sexy. I think that might change this year. Like, I think we might be able to squeeze something out of these oranges, so to speak. So, you got anything before we jump into the Dolphins, Don, or should we start with the Dolphins?
I love freshly squeezed oranges.
I mean, they come from Florida, right? So it makes sense that we're going to Miami. We're
And I'm wearing a flamingo shirt. Like, I think it's all suitable for finally the Miami team to pan out. You were heavy on them one year. I was heavy on them the next year. Maybe this is the year.
Yeah, maybe we'll see. I think the biggest. Let's start big picture here. So obviously Adam Gase is out. He's in New York. We talked about that in detail last episode. Brian Flores is the new head coach for the Miami Dolphins. If you are wondering who Brian Flores is, I don't blame you. He is a first-time head coach. He has been a defensive coach with the Patriots for his whole career. He has never been a coordinator, and he was most recently the linebackers coach. So a bit of an interesting hire as a brand new head coach. They did hire Jim Caldwell to be the assistant head coach. He has experience in a head coach role as well as the quarterbacks coach. So that makes a bit of sense. And then in terms of the coordinators, also both brand new. The one that we need to focus on here, because Flores is a defensive guy, is Chad O'Shea. So Chad O'Shea, also a Patriots product, formerly the wide receivers coach for the Patriots. We've seen a lot of Patriots coaching tree guys kind of flounder outside of the New England environment in the past. So I guess history, take that into account. But I think I'm excited for Chad O'Shea because he's talked a lot about being versatile and fitting the scheme to the players. A lot of coaches or coordinators come into their jobs and they say, this is what I do. This is how I play football. This is how we're going to play football. And Chad O'Shea says, no, we're going to come in. We're going to take a look at the talent that we have, and we're going to try and fit our offense to what these guys do well. We're not going to try and force them into roles where they won't succeed. Which is good. And it's refreshing to hear that because it's not something you always hear in the NFL. Don, you got any opinions on the big picture here or the offensive philosophy?
No, I think you laid that out nicely.
All right, let's move right on to the players then. At quarterback, we have Ryan Fitzpatrick, who it is being reported is expected to start over the recently traded for Josh Rosen. Former starting quarterback Ryan Tannehill is now with Tennessee. Both of these guys are undrafted. Do you want to draft either of them?
No. Obviously, with how deep the quarterbacks are this year and they're still going undrafted, shows to not draft them. You don't even know who's going to be starting after a few games this year.
Yeah, I will say with Ryan Fitzpatrick, it being reported that he's expected to start, I have embraced the fact of life that Ryan Fitzpatrick will start at least one NFL football game every year until all of us die. You can keep that one going. Hopefully he gets to all 32 teams at some point in his career. I think that would make for a very fun and fitting storyline, and we can all finally admit that Ryan Fitzpatrick is some sort of otherworldly demon or something like that. All right, let's move on to running back. Kenyon Drake currently going 11th pick in the 4th round. That's running back 24. We also have Kalen Ballage, who is going the 3rd pick in the 14th round. He's running back 59. He's been talked up a lot. And then they have Myles Gaskin, who is their 7th round draft pick out of Washington. He's currently going undrafted, and I think reasonably so. What's your opinion on Kenyon Drake? He was just so boomer bust last year, but that was this whole offense, as we talked about last podcast. Do you like him at that spot in the 4th round?
Man, it's funny because I in our league was the only league I had him, and I literally, as I was drafting him, I was like, I really don't like this, but I literally had to, and it was what it was. Like, there was the weeks where he went absolutely off, and it was normally when he was on my bench, and then the weeks that I had to play him, he did nothing. But that's also really not him to blame. A lot of Adam Gase on that. So I'm gonna go with optimism here and say that I would like him to pan out. I don't know if I'm really going to attack Kenyon Drake just yet. Again, it's still early though. So I would like, this is someone in a team that I like to follow a lot during the preseason to see what, their schemes are, who they're going to play, if there's going to be consistent play, or if they're going to, throw in all those running backs in different ways and really split the share. So that's fine. I think that's where, again, you're hitting a Tariq Cohen that might be, sharing again with Dave Montgomery. Then you got Chris Carson, who gets in the mix of Seattle. Darius Juice is in there with Washington. We don't know what's going on with Washington. So this is literally that realm of everyone's got, split backfields. No one knows whose role is what yet this year. So that's something you're going to have to follow. I think Kenyon Drake is got talent. You just got to see what they're going to do first.
I forgot that you pronounced Darius Geis's last name as Juice.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Juice, man, dude.
I love that. Anyway, I'm with
spell
you.
like juice and not be called Juice.
That's true. He is the Juice. Yeah, I'm with you. I think I'm higher on Kenyon Drake. I'd take him almost like after Kerryon Johnson, who's that's Mark. I think I would take him above Mark Ingram, Philip Lindsay, David Montgomery, Derrick Henry. Maybe not Derrick Henry. I'm pretty high on him, and he's a guy I hated last year, but I kind of, coaches say things and whatever, but I like the way that they're talking about this offense. I think they're going to be willing to give Kenyon Drake a lot of work, and he's a guy who's been pretty efficient in his career. Yards per carry are what they are, but he's averaged 4.7 yards per carry in his career.
When he's playing well.
Yeah, he can do it in the passing game. He got 73 targets last year. Like, that's pretty good. Ballage is a talented guy that a lot of people like, but I don't really see him like unseating Drake. I could definitely see a split, but even if we get a 60-40 split, like I think Kenyon Drake still has a lot of value in that situation. So I'm very, very in on him this year.
Sure. Yeah, I'm cool. I'm totally cool with that. I think I would still take Ingram before him, but then from there, I would say I would take Kenyon Drake before, trying the rest of those guys out.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you like Ballage as a late round flyer?
Not really, because I think taking Drake is already a risk for me that I would be willing to take at that point. But again, I think there's going to be a split, and at that point, I just don't think there's enough of production with the risk of taking Ballage. I'll probably just go elsewhere at that point. No need to take him.
Okay, that's fair. I'm not opposed to taking him. I mean, we always say it's the 14th fucking round. Take. Yeah,
at that point, it is what it is, right?
Yeah, I mean, take guys that you think specifically like might have an edge. I mean, we'll see how camp and how the snaps and that sort of thing kind of pan out in the preseason. But I don't think he's not worth a 14th rounder. I just don't know if I'm specifically going after him either.
Yeah.
In the passing game, the two wide receivers being drafted are Devontae Parker and Kenny Stills. Parker is the second pick in the 14th round. That's wide receiver 60. Kenny Stills is the fourth pick in the 14th round. That's wide receiver 61. So they're going pretty much back to back there. We've also got Albert Wilson and Jakeem Grant, who we know can break off big plays at any really given time. And then you've got Preston Williams, who's an undrafted free agent, but he's kind of like a big guy, big bodied guy who not anyone to mark down at this point, but maybe a name to keep in mind. And if he does have a good preseason, maybe a guy who could work himself into the mix a little bit, maybe in red zone packages, that kind of thing. So I don't really like, am I off base for wanting to take Albert Wilson over Parker and Stills?
No, I think it's funny. I mean, look what Albert Wilson did before he got hurt. I mean, it was off of very crazy things, but it was a Will Fuller effect. It was like every week, like it was bananas, but it was every week. It was a consistent weekly ordeal. So especially when you're saying that they're really going to mold more to the players and what they can do, you might even see more Albert Wilson. So the thing you got to look at is obviously he had a pretty significant injury last year with his hip, and we don't know exactly when he's going to be coming back. He should be back for the beginning of the season, but that's something to monitor. I don't know, man. I'm someone that I really like the whole receiver core. Like, I've been a believer of Devontae Parker for a few years now. I really think the whole Adam Gase leaving might finally leave Devontae Parker to have quite a bit of upside value. But me and Vinny have also been huge advocates of Kenny Stills for quite a few years too. So I think those guys as a that will definitely probably be one of my last round flyers is either Devontae Parker or Kenny Stills. But overall, yeah, Albert Wilson probably will have the highest upside of the three because he does crazy things, but like weekly.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think he's a really talented guy. And like you said, if they're going to sort of form the scheme to the players, he's a guy. If I were the offensive coordinator, I would be looking at him and saying, how do we get the ball in this guy's hands? How can we get him in space? Because he can make big plays. So moving on to tight end, none of them are getting drafted. The expected starter is Mike Gesicki. He's sort of like an athletic freak who hasn't really been able to put it together in football terms yet, but he's entering his second year. We know first-year tight ends generally don't produce, so maybe he might have a future here. We've got Dwayne Allen. He will likely be pretty much a blocker. And then I don't think he actually means anything, but former Raider Clive Walford, who I liked a little bit in Oakland for a while. But do you have any opinion on Gesicki? I think he's the guy we need to talk about.
No, man. I think at that point, we're just spinning the wheel. There's no need to draft him at this point. Dwayne Allen in Miami doesn't do anything. So no, I don't have anything on Gesicki unless you have something different. But I think that's a spin the wheel at that point. You're not going and drafting him.
Yeah, that's fair. I think he's a guy who could work his way into fantasy drafts because he's big and athletic. So he's a guy who might have like a couple of the touchdown catches that get replayed on NFL Network during the preseason. And if that happens, I could easily see him, bumping up into the realm of drafted tight ends. But at this point, until we really see some evidence of him being able to play football rather than just being an athlete, I don't think it's worth it to really go after him. You got anything else on the Dolphins?
No, man. That's it. I'm looking forward to Dolphins this year. I'm not going to invest in them as much as I had, but I think that's someone where hopefully you are going to see the guys that you were heavily invested in the last few years probably have a little bit more consistent production, which would be cool.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on to the Buffalo Bills. So the Bills, no major changes on the coaching staff. We've still got Sean McDermott at head coach and Brian Dable at offensive coordinator. The Bills were very run heavy last year. They were 29th in the league in pass percentage at 53.53%. Some of that is that Josh Allen
running though. How much of that was,
Well, one of the stats I have on Josh Allen is that almost 12% of his dropbacks turned into scrambles last year, which is the second highest rate of the past decade behind only 2010 Michael Vick. Yeah. So let's just get right into Allen then. He's going in the 12th round QB 18. He was one of the most inefficient passers in the league last year, but the second half of the season, they pretty much like opened it up and said, chuck the ball deep. And if there's nothing, just scramble. And like, it ruled. It was so fucking awesome. It led to a ton of fantasy production. I think they're hoping they don't have to do that as much because they did upgrade the offensive line a lot this offseason. He was under pressure on almost 50% of his dropbacks, but Allen showed that he can be a fantasy asset. Are you buying him at quarterback 18?
So in general, Josh Allen, I think he's going to actually have a good personality for NFL. Like him and that Jalen Ramsey trash talk and then like beating Jalen Ramsey is really funny. And I think you're going to see a little bit more like a Baker Mayfield personality in Josh Allen in the NFL. I don't know, man. I'm not going to be someone that's going to go after Josh Allen, but it doesn't surprise me either if he ends up having like a pretty solid fantasy year and lands in like the top 12 to 14 quarterbacks in fantasy this year. Again, like the production you were getting just off of him scrambling and running was like that's just such an upside for him, and he has that ability where that's really going to make up a lot of production from where you might miss with the passing yards or the passing touchdowns.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a little afraid of regression in terms of the amount of scrambling and his 8 rushing touchdowns. Like I think Cam Newton's the only quarterback to have back-to-back 8 rushing touchdown seasons in NFL history. I could be wrong on that. So like those two things are likely going to regress a little bit, but I mean, at quarterback, at where he's getting drafted, we don't need him to be Josh Allen of the last 4 weeks of the season. We just need him to be like pretty good, you know?
Yeah. I think he's going to be like one of the top streamers for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And a guy that, you know, depending on the matchup, you can roll out there and be comfortable with and know that it's not always going to be pretty, but the rushing production is going to give him a pretty safe floor, I think. So
yeah,
I'm in on it. And also just like, there's something fun about starting Josh Allen and just having like that insane like roller coaster of just like, oh no, he missed a wide open receiver by 10 yards. And then like the next play he runs for 30, you know, it's like, there's something like, it makes me feel like I'm in like Point Break. I'm like robbing a bank and surfing or whatever by drafting Josh Allen. So
the king of Buffalo, Josh Allen.
Exactly. So I think that pretty much sums it up on him. So let's move on to these running backs. It's crowded and it sucks. We've got LaShawn McCoy. He's the 9th pick in the 8th round. That's running back 39. He's the only one being drafted, but we also have in this backfield Frank Gore. We are aware of who Frank Gore is at this point in our lives. Good old TJ Yeldon. And then the 3rd round rookie, Devin Singletary. So do you have any sort of faith in McCoy? And then sort of walk me through the rest of these guys and your takes on them as well.
Just like looking at this running back core might give me a worse stomach ache than crushing a country fried steak with chocolate milk.
Jeez, that's tough.
Yeah, dude. Like that's just a disaster. LaShawn McCoy is going to be 31. Frank Gore is 70. TJ Tasty's your 3rd RB. Like that's just woof, dude. I actually did do a mock though today for the first time, and I ended up drafting LaShawn McCoy, and it didn't feel right. But where he was landing was right before AP, right behind Austin Eckler and Carlos Hyde. At like that point, you're really reaching anyway.
Yeah, it's one of those picks where you like hold your nose and like do it, I guess. Yeah. But I mean, like I don't know. Maybe it's me like wanting a shiny new toy as opposed to like you know, LaShawn McCoy. But like in that area, just like Jerick McKinnon's there, like Jalen Samuels might be interesting. Like I don't know, like Deontay Foreman. I don't know. It's yeah. I just have trouble believing that any given week in the season I'm going to roll out LaShawn McCoy and be like, yes, this is good.
Oh no, definitely not going to happen. But at that point, dude, I think like if I needed a running back, I think that's where I would take him over those guys. But it's not a sexy pick. You know what it is. It's LaShawn McCoy at 31 years old in Buffalo. You just got to hope for the best. I'm fine with that value if you're in need of another running back at that point in the draft. That's who I went with in the mock. That's who I'd probably go with real time unless something changes between now and in the preseason.
Okay, fair enough. Is Frank Gore going to do anything besides piss us off because he's taking production from other people?
Dude, I don't know, man. I don't think I've been giving fantasy advice about Frank Gore since we started this podcast like 6 years ago. I was like, yeah, that dude is like a year away from like a walker for like 6 years, and he's still out there getting like 60 to 90 yards, possibly a touchdown, like really just fucking everybody's day up. So I don't know. I'm going to still plead the fifth on this one on Frank Gore. I don't know what to tell you about him.
That's a completely fair take, and I am also not going to comment on Frank Gore. TJ Tasty's a little like frustrating for me that he ended up here because he's coming off the best year of his career. Like he wasn't bad last year. And he's a guy who like if McCoy and Gore weren't in front of him or weren't on the team, like I would be pretty comfortable with investing in him as a guy who, you know, isn't going to be the flashiest or necessarily the best, but as a guy who could be a solid player. As of now, though, I think it's hard to really invest anything in him unless we see injuries in this backfield.
Yeah. So this is what I think. And you're right. I think that at the end of it all, I think actually TJ Yeldon will have the best season out of all three of them. But it's not going to be coming from early in the season. It's going to be second half season, plugging TJ Yeldon more for either injury reasons or because they realize that they have literally two dudes that combined for 80 years old. So they might as well play TJ Yeldon because He's got way younger legs, and it's really not that bad of a running back.
Okay. Would you like throw a flyer in on him and, like one of the last rounds or that kind of thing, or not that far?
I probably wouldn't, but I don't hate it either. Like at that point, I normally go for like my late round flyers is usually like a receiver that I think is going to turn out like a Devontae Parker or Kenny Stills. But I'm really cool with if you want to milk on TJ Yeldon. I just don't think that by that point, I think you're going to cut him before his fantasy relevance comes into play.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Don. I was just gonna say, if you draft TJ Yeldon in the last round, like you're gonna cut him for this year's Phillip Lindsay, like immediately.
Right.
So it's kind of whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
And then the other guy in this backfield is rookie Devin Singletary. He was their 3rd round pick out of Florida Atlantic. He was extremely, extremely productive at Florida Atlantic University. But he tested as one of the most unathletic backs in the draft at the combine. I guess that didn't really worry the Bills. It's one of those things where you look at all that production, but again, it's not like he's doing it in the SEC. It's Florida Atlantic. So
under Lane Kiffin as well.
Yeah, I don't really have any takes on Devin Singletary. Do you?
When you're the 4th running back behind LaShawn McCoy, Frank Gore, and TJ Yeldon, there's really no take to really be given.
Fair enough. Let's move on to wide receivers. So the one being drafted here, which is kind of interesting to me, is Robert Foster. He's going as the 8th pick in the 14th round. That's wide receiver 65. And then the other guys that you need to know on this team are Zay Jones, who led the team in targets last year, John Brown, who's coming over from the Ravens, and then Cole Beasley coming over from the Cowboys. You would think one of these guys is left out in the cold, right?
Yeah.
Like, which one is it, though? Because I have no fucking idea.
I don't know, man. I'm actually interested. I'm interested for John Brown this year after having like a hot, like especially first half with Baltimore. But I don't know where I don't really have a take on Cole Beasley, though, because, he had a good year last year with Dallas. Maybe it all depends, man. I don't know if Josh Allen's going to hit slot. I really don't know. I don't know where to go with these wide receivers. They're all very like wide receiver 3 on any other team. And now you got like 4 wide receiver 3s all bunched together.
Yeah. I think the thing for me is like conceptually, if they want to just let Josh Allen do what he's good at and let him chuck the ball deep, Robert Foster and John Brown are great outside receivers to do that with, right? Because they're both speedsters. They can both get behind the defense. They allow them to take the top off. That's all fine and good. Zay Jones, though, he's a guy who can play inside and outside, but he's been way more productive in the slot. He did have 102 targets last year. Like he is a guy who has been used with some success in the slot. But then they signed Cole Beasley, who is, obviously a slot guy. And why sign him if you weren't going to play him in the slot? So yeah. I don't really understand where they're going with this. Like, it makes the most sense to me that Zay Jones is the odd man out, but also like he was their most productive receiver last year. So it's a little bit weird. I'm very interested in where guys are lining up and how many snaps people are getting with the starters when we get to, the 2nd and 3rd week of the preseason. So that's something I'm sure we will be updating all you guys on as we go through. To me, the guy, like, here on June 22nd, the guy that I would most want to take a flyer on is John Brown, because I know John 100%. Brown is good.
I agree. I think that he was really like a low end or a high end wide receiver 2 for a good amount of last year.
Yeah, I was fucking riding him the first half of the season. He was great with Flacco, and then Jackson came in and they just changed the entire point of the offense, and John Brown was de-emphasized. So he was a victim of circumstance more than anything else there. I think they ran a very atypical NFL offense with Lamar Jackson at the helm last year. So
yeah, but I mean, we've seen flashes of John Brown when he was with Arizona, then going to Baltimore. Hey, listen, he has a second year quarterback that does have a strong arm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we both agree there. He's the flyer that we like at this time, but again, we'll see how this whole thing shakes out. It's a little confusing here as we sit in mid to late June, but I'm sure we'll get a little bit more clarity before the season starts. So we'll make sure to keep updating and keep bringing our thoughts on that. Tight ends here. They brought in Tyler or well, first of all, Charles Clay is gone. He's with Arizona, I believe, at this point. They brought in Tyler Croft, who has been a backup to Tyler Eifert, which means he has been the starter a lot for the Bengals over the past couple of years. Tyler Croft broke his foot on May 21st, and he is out 3 to 4 months. So, depending on the exact time frame there, that puts him back either at the beginning of the season or maybe a couple weeks into the season, but he's missing the entirety of the offseason with a new team. That's not good. Behind him, we have Jason Kroom, former Raider Lee Smith, who is a great blocker, not a great pass catcher. And then third round rookie Dawson Knox. I don't give a shit about any of them.
No.
All right. I think that'll do it. Oh, no, we have Ed's question of the week. Ed's question of the week. Can you count on any Bills as more than a flex? Good question. Don, what's your opinion there?
Right away, no, but I really like the thought of John Brown actually possibly being like a good option this year. So yeah. I would be most interested to see John Brown. I really liked what I saw last year, the first half of the season before, they did put in Lamar Jackson. So I would like it, but as of now, no. But I would like to say John Brown has the upside to be something more than just a flex.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think there is someone on this team who is more than a flex. I think there is, a wide receiver 2 somewhere sitting around here. I can't say for certain who it is, but I lean towards John Brown just like you. At this point, I don't think anyone on this team is a starter until we get some more information. So we'll figure it out, I guess. Yeah, what am I trying to say? That wraps up the AFC East. We're done with the AFC East. Good job, dude. Professional fucking audio. Yeah, that'll do it for the AFC East. We're coming back with the AFC North next week. That should be very fun. A lot of very important players in that division. So definitely make sure you're stopping by for that one. Don, what do you have to leave the people with after we finish up our first division as a tandem this offseason?
If you can listen to us for the AFC East, you can definitely listen to us for the AFC North.
Yeah, for sure. If you just sat through me and Don waxing poetic on John Brown, then wait till you hear what we have to say about Odell Beckham.
We'll be waxing something, that's for sure.
Yeah. He's implying our dicks. All right, guys. Well, this has been a ton of fun. Don, thank you for joining me. For Don, I am Walsh. We are Let's Talk Fantasy Football. Later, podcast.